This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us again this week. It's good to have you here with us and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. In the previous episode, I spoke to the author, Dr. Craig Newman, on his revolutionary, in my opinion, book called Get Out, Get Love. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I really would encourage you to listen to that before you listen to this one, because it will give you some context of where we're going to go in this episode. This week, I thought it'd be really cool to have somebody on who's actually gone through the programme. So I'm going to let her introduce herself to you all, and then we're going to just get into it over a cup of tea. This is actually take 2, keeping it real with the listeners. We recorded a great episode the other day, but due to tech issues and Wi-Fi, we had to meet again and re-record. So thank you for the second time.
And thank you for having me again.
Okay, so introduce yourself. Tell everyone who you are and as much or as little as you want about you, your background, and how Get Out, Get Love came to you.
So my name's Charlene, and I have been going through the programme for a year, finished it just a few weeks ago. And I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, which is obviously how I came across the book and the programme.
Okay, great. So you're going to be a really key person to speak to this week. One, because I'd be interested in your journey and your processing throughout the book, but also for those that are listening, that are in those early stages of either leaving the relationship or in that full process of wanting to make change, on actually your thoughts and feelings as you were coming into it, to give hope and encouragement to those that are at the beginning of the journey. It's a journey that you've got no map for often. It's got no map of direction of where you're going to be going, or even the emotions that you're going to experience. And I think that it'd be really cool to kind of give that to the listeners of going, where you're at right now isn't going to be where you finish.
So I think when I came across Get Out, Get Love, I wasn't actually trying to do the programme for me as a typical survivor, and that kind of looking to help others and putting others before yourself and seeing others' needs before your own needs. I had just done some charity work for Refuge. I'd been quite public about it on LinkedIn, not that I was a survivor, but that I was doing that. And I work in digital health. So I was saying, actually, is there any domestic abuse programs within digital health that I can help with? And it was deathly silence apart from this Get Out, Get Love program. And they were doing a focus group. So I thought, well, I know about domestic abuse. I know about digital health because they've got this program as a book, as an app. So I'll help them out. So I joined the focus group. I'd listened to it at the beginning, and I hadn't just left at that point. In terms of my recovery at the time, I probably thought it was as good as it was going to get. I was better than I had been before. I'd done, in inverted commas, the help that was out there, like I'd done the Freedom Programme. I was in touch with the local domestic abuse services, my local one and the national ones. And I just thought, I'll help them out with my experience. I didn't really see that I needed healing. I just thought where I am is where I am. And I wasn't actually very complimentary about it at the beginning, bearing in mind that most stage of recovery where I was at, I was very resistant to having to listen to a man's voice. And as a staunch feminist, And, there's women are disadvantaged in lots of areas of life. And coming from a digital health background, there's hardly any investment in healthcare for women. And looking at it from that perspective, there I am listening to a man telling me how to recover from another man. And I just thought, things only get sorted out when it happens to a man, was actually what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So my first thing was, I don't want to listen to a man. Can we change the voice?
I hear you.
And also I was like, why are we calling it Get Out, Get Love? Having the word love in there just seemed to me totally inappropriate and highly against my feminist ideals. It never occurred to me that it was talking about internal love. Automatically, when you say the word love to me, I think about externally sourcing that. So I was thinking about finding a partner. So my position at the time was, I don't ever want to be with a man again, ever. I'd consider same-sex relationships purely to get away from the abuse, and then found out that it also happens in same-sex relationships. So my view was, well, that's me done. I had that side of me totally switched off anyway. And I quite resented the fact that my journey from this program's perspective wasn't over because I hadn't found love. And I just thought, no, a man isn't the solution, because that's how I understood it to be at the time. So actually, I didn't really like it. I thought I was, someone's got to tell them. Someone's got to be the voice of.
Yeah.
I'm the person who's telling you got spinach in your teeth. So I just told them all everything I thought. And I kind of thought I was doing them a favour. And then a bit further down the line, wanted to be a bit more involved in some of the focus groups. And I thought, okay, well, I need to read a bit more of this now so that I can really give it to them. And was through Act 1 and suddenly went, oh, that's how it happened to me.
I like the raw honesty, because actually I think that we have to be honest with ourselves about where we're at and what we're feeling and what we're thinking. Keeping it real is that I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially when you have gone through months, years of abuse at the hands of a man. It's like, how dare a man tell me how I should feel? I think it's worth mentioning that Dr. Craig Newman is a survivor himself. So he does have that survivor voice. And yes, domestic abuse can happen to a man. And so he's coming from that aspect as well. So you've got that survivor voice and a male voice, but then you're a female and you're like, hang on a minute, this doesn't really make an awful lot of sense in my head. But actually interesting, because we've already had this conversation, how quickly that changed for you.
Yeah, do you know, I actually think that him being a man, and actually he is very ungendered in his approach, and this program is probably one of the only ones I know. I've come across a lot of organizations that isn't gendered. And I think a key point that he makes, which is really valid, is if we just end up gendering this, and you have, Women's Aid and Refuge and all of those which are female services, then you've got the male ones like the Respect, etc., that actually domestic abuse just happens to people regardless of gender. Yes, it happens more so to women than it does to men, but that doesn't mean that we have to gender the support that we get. And I think from him necessarily gender the support, because I do also appreciate in recovery there are some people who can't even hear a man's voice or be in the presence of a man, so I do understand. I'm only speaking from my own voice, but for me it did definitely help me being a man, because it ungendered it for me. And what that did then for me was to be able to unlock this idea of, oh, I'm never going to be with another man again, you must be joking, to naturally this isn't about men and women, and yes, I'm open to, god damn it, that word, I'm open to love. So,
love, there it comes.
Love is the answer, but self-love actually. And that being with a partner would represent something totally different than it had before. I'd be sourcing love for myself. So actually I think the fact that it was a man made that process, I don't know, more intentional maybe. I think what changed my mind about one of the pennies that dropped in the program was when there was something in it that said something along the lines of, actually closing yourself off to an aspect of your life isn't freedom, and you and I can't remember whether Craig said this in the program or whether this was a realization for me, that actually then they've still got slight control over you and they are limiting your life going forwards. And when I saw it like that, I thought, actually, this is true. It's not being strong and saying I can do it on my own, never again, I'll have somebody else. It was actually me with real trust issues and not healed, to not be able to have a relationship again. So then I did see, actually, I have got problems here that I would like to work on.
This is now about me, because something has
Yeah.
just dropped, and now I'm opening up to something, one that I'm not prepared for. And I think that there is that accountability to self, isn't there? Is that we can go through life, or we can go through our experiences, and just like you said, we can have our guard up, and therefore having our guard up we feel is protecting us, but actually it doesn't protect us. I don't think it just hardens. It hardens our attitudes, it hardens our emotions. As humans, we are designed for intimacy, we are designed for love, we are designed to not have our hearts hardened by the world, if that makes any sense. So you having that moment in that book of going, okay, right, this is now about me, and now I'm going to give myself the permission to go through this open-minded, rather than going in with that different kind of mindset.
And I think, you know, that idea of, like, as soon as you think of the word love, my mind went to getting love externally from a man.
Yeah.
It never, ever, ever occurred to me that by getting it from myself, I was therefore no longer vulnerable to abuse. And when that penny dropped, that was huge.
It starts with ourselves, is that actually it's not about finding that external love. It's very much about accepting who you are as an individual, and starting to like that person. Were there any particular moments for you where you were like, okay, now I get it, now I see it from that different perspective?
Yeah, there was one bit when I'd already had presented me the idea that you chose to stay, and it had really offended me.
Yeah.
Because to say that I had chosen that awfulness, I don't really know how to put it into words. It hits me deep now. I knew what abusive behaviours were. Yes, I accepted they were done intentionally to me, because that had happened on the Freedom Programme. And then in the Act 1 of this, I kind of understood then how psychologically it happened. It's about cognitively understanding it. It's information that you need to learn and understand. So that bit really happens quite quickly, I think, because it's just about, your brain getting it. I really liked the fact that it came from a point of, we are biologically designed, our brains have evolved to help us with certain coping mechanisms to help us in the moment. And whilst they don't help you leave, they help you stay, they're helping you in your current situation you're in, which is this cognitive dissonance and disassociation, and the pure fact that the brain doesn't like having two competing beliefs, so it has to go for one or the other, and then therefore goes for, you're the problem, you shouldn't have done that, if you don't do that, that won't happen to you again. And that really helped me understand how had it happened. And it took it away from me feeling like low self-worth, I think, and low self-respect, I'd let this happen to me, to we are biologically designed, and it was the way our brains have been designed to function in extreme stress, which was really helpful. And then there was another bit about, just thinking about the way I said, let this happen to me. And there'd been some kind of spiritual work I'd done before, which was about how I'd let that happen. I had chosen to stay in that situation, which really angered me. But the way it was put in the Get Love program was that this is a dance that the two of you do together. You might be voluntary, you might be involuntary, but there are two people doing a dance together, and that's how this functions. And that for me really kind of helped me see my role in it, but without it being having to take a responsibility or a blame, I suppose, but more of an understanding of, I was there too in it, and how do I make sure I'm not there again in it.
And you know, that first part is understanding very much, well, what's my story, how did I get here, why am I at this position? And like what you were saying is about how almost physical dance with one another, but actually there's a psychological thing that's happening at the same time. I hear what you're saying. I didn't let this happen to me. I didn't just lie there and let my abuser do whatever they wanted to for me to do, but actually there was something going on for me, because at that moment, instead of walking out the door, I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to fix him. I'm trying to fix me. The way that I described it to Craig was around this addictiveness that happens. If we really unpick addiction and what that looks like, it's the need. I need this to be able to function, to be able to move on. Because that for me in the program was that eye-opening moment of recognizing that cycle of addiction. It's easy when you say the word addiction to kind of go into your mind, and as you're listening now, you're probably thinking of the obvious addictions such as drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping, food, for example. But actually there's a feeling that goes with that addiction. Yes, you've got the external, be that the glass of wine, for example, but actually there's something that goes on in the brain at that moment that you get the relief. And that is that I think is what you just said around being in these relationships, is that it's not that particular person, it's that feeling. And it's part of that addictive cycle that goes on, because actually once I've had that drink, the tremors stop, and now like I can kind of manage for a little while until they kick up again. And it's that very powerful psychological thing that happens when we're in these relationships where we have been stripped off our own beliefs. Often we're stripped off our control. We don't know right from wrong. We don't know if I like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. It's that real subtle but powerful behavior that a perpetrator does that changes the way that we think, feel and do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back to the only time I felt relief was when, knowing your perpetrator so well in the cycle, you know you're in the bit of the cycle where things are going to be calm for a little bit. Maybe that's only 5 minutes, maybe it's a week, it depends on how fast your cycle is, but that's the only way you get it. So if you try to step out of that cycle, what you're trying to do is get relief at the end of the day. That's for me, that's what I was trying to get, as relief. It wasn't ever about trying to meet his needs for the sake of meeting his needs. It was so that through that I was able to meet my own needs of relief from it. And so when you step out of that cycle, your brain's going like danger zone, like what are the consequences of this, what is going to happen, this is like, oh, you've really done it now. And you're not going to get a relief from those feelings. What you are used to doing is seeing the perpetrator calm to give you a relief, which is why we go back and back and back and back and back, because those feelings of anxiety and stress just go off the scale when you're doing something against the perpetrator, will upset the perpetrator, or you think will upset the perpetrator. And understanding that kind of idea of relief and release, really, and tension. When I understood that, I realized that it came from way before, from my childhood, from inconsistent childcare giving as an infant, and then now post abuse, I do this in really ridiculous things, like not having a shower and seeing how stinky I get, and I feel really disgusting about myself and really low self-worth. And I know that the more I let myself fall into that pit, the greater the relief will be when I finally have a shower. And and in bigger aspects of my life, I'm in that, it's that you need to break. It's that cycle, and people don't talk about that cycle.
And that's why I believe that the program is revolutionary, because I come across lots and lots of different books, lots of research, lots of programs, and they all make sense. They're all really great, but what they're missing is that bit, is understanding that bit that is going on. Because yes, rightly so, we need to put the behavior of the abuse back on the perpetrator, absolutely. But there's something going on inside of me that nobody is capturing, and I can't articulate it because nobody understands it. So therefore I'm not going to bother talking to my colleagues or my friends or my family about it, because you don't understand what it is that's going on side, and it's that conflict. I know that this is wrong. In my case, definitely, I also need this. Do you know what I mean? It's that, it's kind of that, again, dance that is happening. This
Yeah,
is what's
awfulness,
happening.
awful dance.
And then this is what I need. And that wasn't necessarily about, him or them or whatever. It was
Yeah.
actually feeding the bits of our soul that we keep hidden, the bit that is like there, that's kind of, we hide from the world, but actually I need that void to be met. And I
Yeah,
think
it
we
really
need
is
to
that
be
deep.
real about that.
I actually found it kind of reassuring. But I tell you what, I had a dream a week or so ago about my abuser. And in it, he said, oh, he was smiling. He said, oh, so I came along and I smashed your life up, did I? And I said, yeah, you did. And then I said, this is in my dream, okay? And then I said, but I'm a totally different person now, so you'll never be able to do it again. And I turned on my heel, like mic drop and walked off. And that is actually how I feel. And anybody that comes in to try to do that dance with me again, I've changed my steps.
Yeah.
And it's a daily practice, which we'll talk
Yeah.
about later, I think, in terms of
Yeah.
making sure your dance steps stay different. And it feels empowering. It's nice to know there's something I can do about this within me to
Yeah.
change my future, rather than just I'm reliant on being able to spot these guys or women or abusers in general who are very hidden in the wild. It's nice to know that actually they won't fit with my new rhythm anymore. The second bit of it, this fogs idea, which is about the your old friends that were there to help you in the situation. Fear kept you safe, obligation made sure that you did your duties to them, guilt made sure if you stepped out of line you stepped back in line, and shame made sure you didn't tell anybody else. This is my takeaway of those emotions, how they worked with me. And I really like the positioning there about they're still with you. And instead of, being really against yourself, which I was, of like, I remember the day after being like, what is wrong with me? I've left. Like, why can't I just pick myself up and crack on? Of realizing, don't be against them because you just make them worse. They are your friends. They had to take a driving seat, and now you just need to soothe them. It's way easier said than done. But that for me is the bit where it takes a long time, because that is about, I suppose, I mean, I'm not a psychologist at all, but for me, I think about it's like rewiring your brain from automatic function to kind of how do you live with these emotions better. And that is still a work in progress, because I think, I'm not sure we said this at the beginning, this program for me took a year, and I think that's pretty standard for it to take a year. I did it via the app, so I did it's divided into little sections, I suppose, like chapters in the book, which I've not read. And I did that once a week ish. Sometimes I laid off it because I didn't want to ever think about domestic abuse. And sometimes I was on it every day because I was desperate to feel better, because I just hated it. And that was to do with triggers going on, in life, and a continuance of things. So I think that middle section is you have to really put that into practice and practice and practice and practice.
And I think that's really important what you just said, is that there isn't any book out there that's going to magically make your life better tomorrow. I think it's important to acknowledge that actually it takes time to rewire that brain, or rewire those different routes. And you said, actually, there were moments where I picked it up and I had to pull it down, because actually I need the time to process this. There is no point me reading a book in an hour, because I could do the program. I could read the book in an hour, but actually how much of that am I really taking in? And so actually sometimes you do need just to read a sentence or read a paragraph, walk away from it and let that process. And that could take minutes, it could take hours, it could take days for you to sit there and process. Because actually that bit where he's talking about the friends and the obligation and the guilt and the shame, each of those areas could take a little bit of a moment to be able to really fully process that. And I think that's really important for our listeners to know. But for anybody that is doing any program, is that actually it might take longer than what you either want it to or expect it to. Because as survivors, that's our life. I don't need to go back there. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that. That's a part of my life and I've parked it. Yes. Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you've parked all of that, but actually, have you processed, have you dealt with the brain and the emotions and all of that trauma that's just lying there and sat there waiting for it to erupt?
This is a really good point, actually, you brought up this idea of like, yeah, you don't want to go back there, you've left it and you parked it. And I think what I really liked about this approach was I didn't have to, as part of the program, wasn't guided to think about anything, any actions or any words or anything that he'd done or said to me at all. My focus was literally on me, and it didn't bring up any of that actually for me, whereas other forms had. This didn't. This was really about me. And there's real practical steps in there as well. So for some of it, you know, say talk about fear, and then you'll have specific activities to do. So mine, I set a reminder every day called a fear check-in. You just check in with yourself and like, what am I fearing right now? And actually, every time I checked in, I was just like cooking sausages or something. Actually, there were fears there. There were just, I was so used to living like that. So then you have to like, well, there's different things he says you can do. I would dance around the kitchen with a happy song, which kind of confuses your brain. Hang on, I thought we were in fear mode. And while you're trying to just cook sausages, I'm making sure that nothing happens to you. Whereas I'm like, yeah, let's go have a dance. So there's really practical things in this to help you reprogram your brain and help you to kind of assimilate what he's saying, which is really, really useful.
And I think it's also fair to say, and I don't know if it's coming across or I've said it 100 times already, and it is quite obvious, but this program is about you. It's about you, the reader, the survivor, you getting back your, I want to say getting back your life, but actually, like, I'm going to be real, your life is going to look different to what it was before, but it's giving you a different aspect. It's giving you different way of living your life, which can actually be freer and fuller than what it was prior, before, when you're in those moments of what does my life look like when I leave, or if I leave, am I ever going to survive this? Am I ever going to get out of this? All of those thoughts, feelings that you go through when you're in that relationship and even after you leave it. And this program is very much about giving that back to you. How that works for you is dependent on the person that is reading and doing it, but it allows you, or at least opens the door to be able to give you back stuff that was taken away from you.
I think it gives you the opportunity to be able to. So the way I see it is that it's changed my life without a shadow of a doubt. It's changed my life, and I know that sounds quite corny and trite, but it has. It's given me the opportunity to have a fuller, richer life. And regardless of whether you'll still have to maintain contact with your abuser, there's some listeners who'll be in co-parenting situations and think, well, it doesn't apply to me because I'm still in the dance. You can still leave the dance psychologically, which takes away a lot of this kind of power over them. And, you know, you can still do this recovery, even if you're in a co-parenting situation, or for whatever reason, you might still have to have contact with them. Not if you're in it. You know, I think that's a totally different ballgame, which I won't touch on at all. Yeah. It stops you doing the dance, or even physically you are kind of in that contact with them.
And we were just talking about, you know, that section 2 could take some time, you know, pick it up, pull it down, come back to it, really read it, really go back over bits to make sure that you've got it. So that can take a little bit of time. But then we get into once you've gone through that bit and you're like, yeah, I've got this now. I've got my check-ins, I've got my practical tools that I'm doing continuously. It's now become a habit. It's now part of my daily life. It's part of my daily routine. We then get into the next bit, which is always the hardest bit. Obviously, our listeners can't see your face, and nor can they see mine, because it's the bit that we struggle with the most, I think, as women, is self-worth, self-love, self-compassion, living the program. And that's hard.
Yeah, I think, that Achilles heel that we talked about, I talked about my Achilles heel at the beginning of inconsistent caregiving. I think there is an Achilles heel which ultimately you could put under the umbrella of self-worth. And so you have sourced it externally rather than internally. And there's a thing saying, isn't there, that nobody can ever treat you worse than you treat yourself. So if you're talking to yourself like rubbish, it doesn't seem that much surprise that somebody else is talking to you like rubbish, because you think, well, they're not wrong. And I think that's not a gendered thing. And I think getting self-love internally is not a gendered thing either, actually. So I was going through dating apps, like this is early on in the program, and I would literally swipe thinking, are they going to hit me? Are they going to hit me? Do they look like they'll hit me? And then I went on there recently, as I say, I've only just recently finished the program. I went on there recently and I was like, I'm going to give this fella the lucky chance to be in my life. I'm going to give him this. And I just heard myself in my head and I was like, what a massive change.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just night and day. And then do you know what happened actually after we did the first recording? I was listening to this song and it was about this one's for you. I can't remember what the words are, but it's something like, you're not scared of anything anymore and well done to you and this drink's on you. And I sang it to myself. I was doing the washing up and there's a mirror there and I sang it to myself. I looked at myself in the mirror. I changed the person's name to mine. And I looked at myself and I was like, oh my God, I actually love you. And I started crying.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I actually never have.
Yeah.
Such a weird feeling.
And that's why it's hard, and that can be a really hard concept, especially if you have been told that you're unlovable, that you're unworthy, rah rah rah. You have that belief about yourself, and the title "Get Love" isn't necessarily about getting that external love. It's about getting that internal love from oneself, because once you can get to the stage of looking in the mirror and actually really value the person that you are, that has the power and the ability to change you, your expectations on your life and or any people around that life you have, because you see yourself for who you are. And if you've got people in your life, be it a partner or an ex-partner, or you've got friends that they're only friends because they want to see you in that pit of misery. We've all got them. We've all got those people around us that actually thrive when we're at our lowest. But once we see ourselves in a different light, that's where you get the get love.
Something I didn't say, probably, which we talked about last time, is that when you lift off the rose tinted glasses about how you should be treated and how you're being treated, you see everything in your life then through that. And that process for me was really hard, because I saw that there was a lot of people in my life that it wasn't right. It wasn't necessarily quite abusive, but it was definitely unhealthy for me. So now with self-love, it's a really protective factor. I feel really protected by the fact I love myself, because I can see it in somebody doesn't call, they let you down for a day, if a thing doesn't work out, you see a red flag, and I'm absolutely fine with not being with them because they're not giving me anything I can't get from myself. Yes, I'd like partnership and I'd like to be with somebody, but actually I'm fine on myself. There's not that desperate need. There's not that Achilles heel there of like a craving, of like an addiction to, getting this feeling from somebody else. It's just gone. And I can just see, I just feel it's a really protective factor.
And just like you would in a relationship, I'm probably a cynic of the world, but I'm not a believer in love at first sight. It takes a while to know somebody, to fall in love with them, to have a relationship. You're not going to put all of your eggs, and that is also the same for self, trusting oneself.
Nice.
Trusting that we know our own mind, trusting the decisions that we're making, even if we mess up in that. Like, I don't know, I've made a cup of tea, but I actually don't like tea. It could be really simple things, but trusting ourselves within that moment, because that's been taken away from us, or we've doubted ourselves at some point. And so for me, that section is around, give it time. You've got to trust yourself again. And actually you're pretty damn awesome, and it will take time for you to recognize that person from that different lens, and not the lens that somebody else has given you.
Absolutely. And I think as well, like, it's hard work. The journey's hard work. It's not nice. It's not fun. It's worth it. 100% is worth it. And there's no way I want to give that person up that I've now become now so easily. And also, if we talk about the longer term thing of this, is I don't say I'm cured and I'm the other side now. I'm work in progress, and I've got just the same tendencies to fall back into my old habits as before, just because I was singing to myself in the mirror saying I love you. I woke up this morning and hated myself because I left my alarm off for so many times, and I think I'm useless and all that jazz. And you have to consciously rewire yourself. So there's a whole recovery plan in there, maintenance plan it's called, actually, of these as daily practices or weekly practices or monthly practices to build into your life to make sure that you keep where you are now. And I tell you what, I'm super motivated to keep this on, because once you've done the work and you've got to the other side-ish, or you've at least traversed a lot of it, you don't want to go back. You will do anything to make sure you don't go back.
And that makes sense, though. What you're saying makes sense, because if we go back to earlier in the conversation where we're talking about that addictiveness of that, just like a recovering addict, just like an alcoholic or a drug addict or a sex addict or whatever addict, you don't just go to one meeting and go, right, that's it, I'm no longer an addict. Actually,
Yeah.
most people that have issues with drink acknowledge I'm an alcoholic or I'm a drug addict. They acknowledge that, because actually that is a daily, sometimes hourly, conscious effort of I need to actively put steps in so I don't fall back into that habit or that moment or that temptation of taking the thing that gave me relief, or what I thought was relief. We know that it doesn't give relief, especially like it becomes quite problematic, but that temporary relief. And that's the same for this, is that you're right, we have to consciously put that action in. I have to, you said that you woke up in that moment of I don't like myself, like I overslept or whatever. Okay, but then what's the next steps? Because you could be in that for the next 12, 13, 14 hours that you're awake. Actually, I've acknowledged that, so now I'm going to change that thought, and that takes time, practice, just like it would with anybody that is recovering from an addiction. And I think that's a really important note to note, is that, you know, this requires an action from you, like from me, from the person that's doing the program. What that action looks like is dependent on you as the person. Is it me standing in front of the mirror, or is it me doing a bit of mindfulness, or whatever it may be? Whatever that looks like, I have to consciously do that. Otherwise, I'm going to fall into the trap where the brain is going to get complacent. It's going to feel that I'm okay, everything's great, and easily fall back into that temptation line. So as an addict, as a recovering addict, I know that there is certain places and certain things and certain people that I just cannot be around. I can't mentally go there, because that puts me in a really vulnerable position. Now, that's not to say that I would go ahead and go do, but it puts me in a vulnerable position, and I don't want to be in that vulnerable position. And for you, what you've just said is, I don't want to give where I'm at right now emotionally and spiritually, I don't want to give that up for love nor money, and I'm going to fight to protect that.
Yeah, I really love the way you said that. That is exactly it. That is exactly it. You have to consistently be an ex. I don't know what that is, if you call it an addiction. I don't know, an addiction to bad love. I don't know. But you have to, yeah, you do. You have to make sure. And then in the plan, there are specific, there's a specific, literally walk you through, this is how you do it. These are the practices. A lot of it's around self-compassion. There's a lot of meditations. And I think when you get that kind of idea, through the program, that you need a fix of relief, I use the program, which I don't now. I've taken the tools from the program and integrating them. Then my next bit is to integrate them into my life. But at the time, I went back to the program, which are the times when I said I'd be there quite intently. I just don't want to feel this way. There's grounding meditations in there, which literally are, I need to stop feeling like this now. And you can go back. There's other tools in there as well, which I think is, I suppose it's a bit like when I gave up smoking, you've got the patches, but then I also used to take those little mints or those little like inhaler things, because sometimes you just need a bit of extra help and you need it right then. That's kind of how I see That's kind of how I see it. It gives you the immediate hits that you need through the compassion. There's compassion exercises and through the meditations, and then as part of doing the wider program.
So my last question, a survivor that has gone through their own journey, that has done various programs, come across the Get Out, Get Love, was quite resistant at the beginning, and not resistant necessarily to the program, but just resistant, those feelings of how dare you, who are you, kind of like feelings that were going on. And that you've gone through it, and that you're still having to walk through not only work through your own self recovery, but life and other things. Do you recommend doing the program for those survivors struggling right now?
Yeah, I do. Obviously, I think what I would say to like early survivors, well, I would say my journey at the beginning was, first of all, I did this for survivors, really. When I went into the focus group, I thought I'd be the voice of survivors, and I help this platform that wants to help survivors. And at the end, I'm doing this for me now. So I think it's very hard to have somebody do something for themselves and not that mindset. Give it a go. And it's not female focused, it's inclusive, it's for any gender. It is delivered as a book, or it is delivered as an app, and you can just download like short bits as you go. And as you go through the program, you'll end up doing it for yourself, and that's the best thing ever.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on to this week's podcast. I hope you guys have enjoyed the conversation, and if you feel inclined after listening to this conversation around the Get Out, Get Love program, please do follow the links that I have kept in the description box, which will take you directly to the website where you can look at the digital program, or I've got the link to the book that's in the comments below as well. Hello, and we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation.